This is empowering inclusivity JAWS and web standards collaboration with exploring JAWS' commitment to ARIA and web standards, delving into recent efforts and motivation. We have Roxanne Fisher from Vispero and Brett Lewis from Vispero, and I'm going to turn it over to Roxanne.
Thank you so much for introducing us today. Yeah, I'm Roxanne Fischer. I'm the product manager for JAWS, ZoomText, and Fusion, and my background is in UX, and I will present how a screen reader interprets a website. And I'm here with Brett Lewis. Do you want to say some words to you as well?
Sure. I'm Brett Lewis. I'm a senior software engineer at Vispero. I'm also a product owner on one of our development teams for JAWS. I've been doing accessibility now for 20 years or something, so I've seen the evolution of no standards to lots of standards and how Vispero's been involved. So I think that's why they put me on the spot for today. So.
Yeah, and you worked on website design as well as the assistive technology like the screen reader design, so you really have both insights here.
Went to the dark side for a while.
Which one is the dark side?
I'm not answering that question.
All right, let's get started with a short overview of how does a website reaches a screen reader user. First of all, we have HTML code, the markup language, and some code that then is interpreted by the browser into the visual view that we get, but in addition, it also creates an accessible view, and that one is quite relevant for JAWS to read out as well. JAWS then takes that, transfers it into audio clues, speech output, and Braille, and in the end it reaches the user. This is just an example of HTML code from a website that I'm going to show in a bit, and one thing that I want to draw attention to is the skip to main content. That's a link that is not visually presented, but will be relevant for the screen reader. The next step was the visual layout and the accessibility view that is created by the browser based on actually existing standards, and then the visual output looks like, for example, here it has the Vispero website with a heading and a video, and also accessibility view. This accessibility view is just a presentation of it. There are some drawbacks with it, but overall it conveys the information that the skip to main content that isn't visual shows up here, as in addition to some section information that is not directly visible on the visual side, like a navigation area, the main area, but also the H1 that presents that this is a heading. The next step was to go to the JAWS screen reader or any other screen reader and take the website into a linear output based on speech. And this is the beginning of say all from JAWS if you have a website, and I would like to let it read out by JAWS. I'm not going to read that out myself.
Vispero logo. Navigation region list of 5 items. Visited link home. Link collapsed menu about US. Visited link careers. Link news and events. Visited link contact. List and navigation region and main region heading level 1. The world's leading assistive technology provider heading level 1 for the visually impaired.
I'm sorry, I think that was quite quick to translate, but I wanted to have it a bit quicker as well because screen reader users have it in a faster speed as well to get all the information. In addition to speech output, we also have a Braille output. And for the Vispero website, that's also linear, and this is the Braille viewer, and it shows what is presented on the Braille display as well. The picture cuts off a little bit. There's L and K for link as a short term. Then about us, the visual text that we also see on the screen. And in addition, it has a plus and a kind of arrow symbol, and that one actually conveys the information that it is a collapsible link that the speech output is speaking as full message, but in Braille we can have it shorter so that people have more real estate on their Braille display left and are quicker to read it. Last but not least, after the screen reader got the context and we have the speech output and the Braille output, there is the last step in the process, that is the human that needs to analyze the input he gets and makes sense out of it to perform an action that he wants to do. And there are 3 elements that are really relevant for that. First of all, it's clarity. The important information need to be conveyed. Then it's productivity. It needs to happen in a concise way that you can actually work with the information you get. And last but not least, the learnability. We can shorten text to a really, maybe just one sound, but then it increases the difficulties to really learn what it means. So these are the 3 aspects we need to take into account and that are quite relevant when it comes to presenting ARIA and web information. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Brett.
So last week, one of the engineers asked me what I was presenting at CSUN, and I started talking about web standards. And there was this long pause, and he said, I don't know if you could make that sound more boring. I'm hoping that doesn't come through, because I actually think web standards are critical to where we are with making accessible websites at all. And that's what I wanted to talk about now for the next at least couple of slides. So obviously, most of us are familiar with WCAG, what it is. I mean, it's guidelines, it's in the name, right? The accessibility guidelines. But it doesn't really provide, it doesn't tell you as a web author, how do I make something accessible? It kind of judges the end product, and it says, we fail or succeed on these 13 guidelines and these success criteria, right? It doesn't say, well, you should always make this happen. It says in the end it should happen, but it doesn't necessarily describe that whole process of getting from I have an idea for a website to how do I make it accessible. It's more an after the fact, check it to see if it's accessible or not. And so it provides that overall guidance and that end check to see if it's accessible. But what Roxana's been talking about a little more, and the part that I want to talk about next, is sort of the ARIA standards. So the next slide, please.
It's up.
Thank you. So the ARIA standards, web authors, I think of ARIA as sort of this thing that you have to apply to your code to make it accessible, right? There's no other alternative. That's kind of unfortunate. I know some people have talked about that whole first rule of ARIA is don't use it, but the question is how, and that's definitely a good guideline. But a lot of the standards involve, this ARIA spec. So we said, okay, now we have ARIA. Here's how you should mark up a website. But how does that get translated into what the screen reader sees? There's still those steps in between that Roxana talked about, and those are governed largely by some accessibility standards. So ARIA, for example, can be translated into an accessible view, the browser. There's rules about how the browser should take that ARIA and translate it into an accessibility tree of objects and a series of events that's then presented to the screen reader. And those are governed by standards, as I said already. So there's the core accessibility API mappings, and that takes a lot of the ARIA information and maps it to this accessibility tree that the screen reader gets to see, and the HTML to accessibility mappings as well. So you can, in fact, just use standard HTML, and that will turn into an accessibility tree that the browser can present to a screen reader. That next step, however, that part where we take the accessibility tree and we translate it to the screen reader, that's the part that traditionally there really hasn't been a lot of standards. There's been this work on standardizing some of that, and it's been ongoing for a while, and we'll come back to that here in a few minutes. I want to talk more in depth about that specifically, But I think Roxana is now going to talk about some of the challenges as a screen reader developer that we have to consider when presenting that information, taking that accessibility tree and those events and making it into something that a screen reader user can actually use and use efficiently.
Yeah, how are we defining the JAWS user experience based on ARIA and web content that we are getting? So how are we making this? And I already said that there are some guidelines we are following. The first is access to relevant information, and that's something that's often discussed. Critical visual information must be conveyed. You need to know if it's a button, you need to know the label, and often also the state information, if it is disabled or not, or if it's checked or not, is quite critical to understand the user interface in the first place and work with it. But one thing that sometimes is left out is that we cannot just convey information unlimited. There is a second consideration, and that is preventing over-communication. Because JAWS conveys the information kind of linear, one element at least is read out with type, name, and then status, and extra information that we might convey. This increases the cognitive load on the person to really filter out, okay, which information of this is critical for me, which do I really need? And in addition to the cognitive load, also the productivity is hindered if we are communicating too much, as well as the learnability, especially for someone who just gets used to listen to speech output instead of visual output. If we consider people that started with a screen magnifier and then slowly move over to a screen reader experience. Yeah. My background is in human-computer interaction, and for UX research, the cognitive load and the overload of information is something that we already considered for so many designs. We know that minimal design is by now dominant and is one of the core elements when designing a website, especially if you have limited space available, for example on a phone and a watch. This gets more important, and the same is true for speech output, because we cannot convey too much at once. Keeping the unimportant components in a design reduces the relative prominence of importance of key elements. And I have some example here with an email field and a long description how you should enter your email address, which elements to use, which letters you can use, including the domain name. But if we just shorten it to the most shortest example that we can give, please enter your email address in this format. It's much easier for someone to understand and perform the action instead of going through the long text and mapping that together. So it's critical for both, for visual design as well as for what we convey with a screen reader, to focus on the relevant, essential parts. To come back to one example that I gave, I highlighted on here the information that we actually added as a screen reader to convey the visual information in blue, and all the other text that was also on the website before in black. And it's like 50% that we are adding with verbal text communication to ensure that also the type is conveyed. To sum it up, this is why it's so important for us to focus not just only on access to relevant information, but also preventing over-communication. And there's one more thing that we can obviously do with working with both, that is be clever on how to communicate the information. And like I said, we see that with Braille, where we are shortening the link information to LNK. We do that with buttons as well, always to like 3 elements or less to convey which element it is without taking too much time to read, but also summarizing really long text like, it's not saying drop down, it's collapsible link into a shorter information so that it's easier to read. And with that, I think, oh, no, we have one more. The JAWS customization. On default, the web verbosity on a screen reader is set to medium, so a screen reader user can adjust it up or down based on how much information we want to have. And for the other verbosity, we start as beginner high, and people can decrease it, so to get less speech output and to make it easier when they are more familiar with the website or the application in the first time. One keystroke that is important by this is insert tab, because it always conveys the full information. Means you can decrease the verbosity, but then also, if you have a feeling something is missing, use insert tab to get additional information. For JAWS, it's also important that we do some extra steps, because we want to empower the user to navigate the digital landscape. And I think all of us know that not all websites are really accessible. There are some challenges that JAWS and screen reader users need to overcome. Labels are sometimes missing, so we do a label prediction. We are looking if there's tag for added field, if there's text above that we can use as a label. If there's too much repeated text or a lot of blank lines, we are skipping them to improve the productivity. We currently ignore unlabeled, non-linked graphics because there's not much information to convey. And we also have a feature, Smart Glance, that allows the user to look for visual interesting text that isn't highlighted as a heading or anything else, but still stands out. One good example there is, YouTube. When they have live videos, they have that in red as a small symbol, but still visually standing out because of the color, and the Smart Lens can help detecting elements that visually stand out, even though they are not marked. For the desktop heuristics, we even have more caret recognition, screen highlighting recognition, but we are not going to go deeper into that, because I'm going to hand it back to Brett to tell us about Area AT.
So Roxana is just a brief recap. So we started out talking a lot about how a web author gets their information translated to a website. We've talked a little bit about the standards that are part of all that process along the way. And then Roxana talked about a lot of the challenges that we have as a screen reader developer in conveying information, all the things we have to balance. And I mentioned earlier that there's no standard for what the screen reader interaction should look like. And that's not quite true. There's been this ARIA AT standard that's been in development for a number of years. I've been involved at least since 2019. And ARIA AT is really focused on making sure that as a screen reader user, you're going to have a consistency of an experience. Roxana was saying earlier that if you have a button, for instance, you want to know that it's a button. So you want to know that type of control, no matter how you navigate to that button. If you tab to it, if you've gotten to it in reading mode, you need to know it's a button. So if your screen reader doesn't convey that information to you, it's obviously falling down somehow. And so trying to, come up with some way to get that intermediate step of making sure that we have standardization of information that's available from different screen readers is what the ARIA AT project has largely been focused on. One thing that comes up when we talk about this is, are we as screen reader developers giving up some of our flexibility, some of our ability to innovate? And maybe there's some of that, but I think since the ARIA AT project's been largely focused on interaction patterns that are basic to a screen reader, encountering a button, moving to lists of links, what should be spoken when an alert is activated by your screen reader, those kinds of things. Yes, there is some reduction in what we can do as a screen reader developer, but on the other hand, I believe that it gives us the opportunity to free up some of our resources to think about innovating in more useful ways for our users. If we can give someone a consistency of experience, no matter what screen reader they're using, when they come to JAWS, they will know that they can get that same information. So they can focus on the features that really set us apart. So next slide, please. So what is the REAAT process? So I kind of did the high-level overview. The more of the details, basically REAAT has a number of the design patterns from the ARIA Authoring Practices Guide, and they're trying to develop a series of tests for each of these design patterns for things that should be conveyed. And so, you know, as I mentioned before, the button, knowing that the role of the button is announced, knowing that if it's the state of the button's announced, if it's a toggleable button, knowing the name's announced, those kinds of things. Those are all individual tests that would be part of assessing the accessibility of a particular design pattern, say for buttons. So what happens right now is there's a number of these tests that have been developed for some of the design patterns. It's kind of a continuing process. They keep proposing new ones. They go through this whole process of, you know, review by the community, and if we, you know, the community, Vispero as part of that community has input on those tests. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then, you know, those tests move on to, we test screen readers. And so this has been a manual testing process up to this point. So there's been, someone will sit down, there's a script essentially of keystrokes and information you should hear with your screen reader. And so someone manually goes through and tests and says, you know, when you navigate to a radio button, does it announce that it's a radio button? Does it announce its position in the set of radio buttons? Does it announce its check state? And so on. And if you go to the REAAT website now, you can actually look at test results for different versions of screen readers. I think right now there's JAWS, I'm not sure which versions of JAWS are available, NVDA and VoiceOver. And so you can see how each screen reader does on the tests that have been, or the design patterns that have been tested so far. The tests themselves are not always of the form you must have something. Sometimes there's optional information. So there's 3 levels of requirements. There's must, I hate to use the word requirements since may is not required, but there's must and should, and both those are pretty important to have if you want your screen reader to be functional in this design pattern. And then there's may, which is, I think of it as largely optional. And you know, we can argue about which one should be which, and we'll talk a little bit more in the next slide about that. But this whole manual testing process gives you that kind of information. You can go to their website, you can look it up, you can see if your screen reader is doing well or not in these basic scenarios. One of the things, as I said, it's all been manual testing to this point, and this is the part that I'm most excited about, which I think probably says something about a fundamental flaw in me, but is the automated testing. There's this IT driver protocol that's being developed, and essentially it's a way to let your screen reader be manipulated on a website to perform these tests. And right now what they do is they record the output, and then they can compare it to see if it's changed. So if maybe one of your versions of JAWS has regressed somehow. I know that never happens. But next slide, please. So how has Vispero been involved in all of this? As I said, we regularly meet with the REAAT group, and we do give them feedback on upcoming tests for different design patterns. So we've been involved in sort of iterating with them about the best way to move these forward, maybe language changes that we could use, ways to sort of clarify this. Once we've agreed on those, and you know, there's input from the community, so it's not just Vispero dictates. It's all of us, but Vispero does have a large input because we've chosen to be involved in this. We've also taken the feedback from these tests. When something doesn't work, we take it as a high priority issue to fix, because it's one of those things that, you know, we want to support these standards, and if we want to support them and our product is broken, that's a bad thing. So we definitely have worked on making sure that those things get addressed as soon as possible. One of the other things that I think is unique in our situation is we do have access to our private beta testers. And so we are in a good position to try some of these new design patterns and new ways, information that must be conveyed, and have our beta testers tested in the wild. Last year in March, I added support for the disclosure pattern. And a disclosure, if you don't know, is essentially a button that drops down a list of links. And one of the requirements for the REAT to pass this was that when you navigate to the link in the list, it should announce the fact that you're in a list, the number of items in the list, the position of this item, and whether or not it was a nested list. And the issue we ran into, so I put this in JAWS and we rolled it out to our beta testers and immediately got lots of people writing in saying this is a horrible experience. And the reason it was a horrible experience is we found some websites where people would do search results, for instance, and the search results would be a single long list, but each individual search result was a list item inside of a nested list with only one item. Now, why the author chose to do that, I don't know. But it made the experience for our users almost, I mean, it was one of those things that if it was a website you use regularly, it was something that was just painful for you to have to deal with as a screen reader user. So we took that feedback back to the REAT group and said, look, this may be something that you want to say you may have as an option, but it was something that you shouldn't consider it a failure if it does not have. Because it's one of those things that just impacted usability so broadly that we couldn't support it as a company. And we really needed to make sure that that changed. And that was really thanks to our private beta users providing that feedback, being involved with us as much as possible. So that's really something unique about Vispero and I think really helps promote our screen reader development. I think Roxana is now going to talk a little bit more about our ARIA standards involvement. We do have some other, or I should say Vispero standards involvement. So.
Yeah, I will. But I also wanted to point out again how great it is to have a beta group to test it in the real environment. There are so many websites and ARIA is currently used in different ways and not always correct. So we need to evaluate that the standards really fit with the current environment that exists to prevent people to slow down people. All right. It's not the first time that Vispero works on improving web and ARIA. We also have our own community, Vispero standard support, collaboration between TPGI and Freedom Scientific that is a running GitHub resource since 2017. And the goal is to improve JAWS, ARIA, and web support. And it mainly does two things. It allows anyone to submit an ARIA and web-related question or bug if they develop a website and notice that JAWS doesn't work how they expected because, like they say, oh, I use this ARIA attribute, why is it not conveyed? And they think maybe JAWS should. They can submit it and we will look at it and react. Maybe there was a good reason why we decided to not do it, or maybe it was a bug that we should improve in JAWS and announce it in the future, or the other way around as well. In addition, the second part is also that it provides documentation on JAWS, HTML support, and also looking forward to more ARIA support documentation of JAWS. Does JAWS already supports this HTML markup? Then there's a list you can see. And I cannot talk about this without calling out Steve Faulkner, who is here with us as well, who manages for over 7 years. Even though he recently left to TetraLogical, he's still part of this Vispero standard support as well as helping us with the ARIA IT support to give more guidance as well with all the knowledge he has for web development as well and understanding the ARIA attributes. And with that, I think we reach the end. And I have a picture up here with two hands holding a small world, but also one of our missions. Vispero is actually driven by 2 missions, but this one fits better with the effort that we are doing, change the digital world to make it more accessible. Usually with JAWS, we try to empower the individual to manage the navigation in the digital world, but with this effort, we also help web developers to make the website more accessible, and that also will help our users and other screen reader users. I heard that we are not doing questions here, but we will be around to answer any questions in the front here until the other people are coming, and also outside afterwards. So thank you all for listening to us today.
Thank you.